Web, a subset of the internet consisting of the pages that can be accessed by a web browser. In this course, we will cover Introduction to Web, how does the web work, web standards, modern web technologies, web pages and web servers, web best practices. Introduction to Web. The web is the common name for the World Wide Web, a subset of the internet consisting of the pages that can be accessed by a web browser. Many people assume that the web is the same as the internet and use these terms interchangeably. However, the term internet actually refers to the global network of servers that make the information sharing that happens over the web possible. So, although the web does make up a large portion of the internet, they are not the same. Web pages are formatted in a language called Hypertext Markup Language (HTML). It's this language that allows users to click through pages on the web via links. The web uses HTTP protocols to transmit data and share information. Browsers such as Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, or Mozilla Firefox are used to access web documents or web pages which are connected via links. How does the web work? Clients and servers. Clients are the typical web users' internet connected devices. For example, your computer connected to your Wi-Fi or your phone connected to your mobile network. And web accessing software available on those devices, usually a web browser like Firefox or Chrome. Servers are computers that store web pages, sites, or apps. When a client device wants to access a web page, a copy of the web page is downloaded from the server onto the client machine to be displayed to the user's web browser. The other parts of the toolbox. Your internet connection allows you to send and receive data on the web. It's basically like the street between your house and the shop. TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, and Internet Protocol are communication protocols that define how data should travel across the internet. This is like the transport mechanism that lets you place an order, go to the shop, and buy your goods. In our example, this is like a car or a bike, or however else you might get around. How does the web work? DNS, domain name servers, are like an address book for websites. When you type a web address in your browser, the browser looks at the DNS to find the website's real address before it can retrieve the website. The browser needs to find out which server the website lives on so it can send HTTP messages to the right place. This is like looking up the address of the shop so you can access it. HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is an application protocol that defines a language for clients and servers to speak to each other. This is like the language you use to order your goods. Component files. A website is made up of many different files, which are like the different parts of the goods you buy from the shop. These files come in two main types. Code files. Websites are built primarily from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, though you'll meet other technologies a bit later. Assets. This is a collective name for all the other stuff that make up a website, such as images, music, video, Word documents, and PDFs. Web standards. Web standards are the technologies we use to build websites. These standards exist as long technical documents called specifications, which detail how the technology should work. These documents are not very useful for learning how to use technologies they describe. This is why we have sites like the MD and web docs, but instead are intended to be used by software engineers to implement these technologies, usually in web browsers. Web standards are created by standard bodies, institutions that invite groups of people from different technology companies to come together and agree on how these technologies should work in the best way to fulfill all of their use cases. The W3C is the best known web standards body, but there are others such as WhatWG, who maintain the living standards for the HTML language, ECMA, who publish the standards for ECMA script, which JavaScript is based on, Chronos, who publish technologies for 3D graphics such as WebGL, and others. Modern web technologies. There are a number of technologies to learn if you want to be a front-end web developer. For a more detailed explanation on how some of them work together, read our article on how the web works. Browsers. Web browsers are the software programs people use to consume the web and include Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari, and Edge. HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP, is a messaging protocol that allows web browsers to communicate with web servers. The actual syntax for HTTP messages is not that human readable, but this gives you the basic idea. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the main three technologies you'll use to build a website. Hypertext Markup Language (HTML) is a markup language consisting of different elements so you can wrap content in it to give meaning and structure. Cascading Style Sheets (CSS) is a rule-based language used to apply styles to your HTML. For example, setting text and background colors, adding borders, animating things, or laying out a page in a certain way. JavaScript is the programming language we use to add interactivity to websites, from dynamic style switching to fetching updates from the server, right through complex 3D graphics. Tooling. Once you've learned the raw technologies that can be used to build web pages, such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you will soon start to come across various tools that can be used to make your work easier or more efficient. Examples include the developer tools inside modern browsers that can be used to debug your code, testing tools that can be used to run tests to show whether your code is behaving as you intended it to, libraries and frameworks built on top of JavaScript that allow you to build certain types of websites much more quickly and effectively, so-called linters, which take a set of rules, look at your code and highlight places where you haven't followed the rules properly, minifiers, which remove all the white spaces from your code flies to make it so that they are smaller and therefore downloadable from the server more quickly. Server-side language and frameworks. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are front-end or client-side languages, which means they are run by the browser to produce a website front-end that your users can use. There are another class of languages called back-end or server-side languages, meaning that they are run on a server before the result is then set out to the browser to be displayed. A typical use for a server-side language is to get some data out of a database and then generate some HTML to contain the data, before then sending the HTML over to the browser to display it to the user. Example of server-side languages include ASP.NET, Python, PHP, and Node.js. Web pages. Web page. A web page is a hypertext document provided by a website and displayed to a user in a web browser. A website typically consists of many web pages linked together in a coherent fashion. From the perspective of server-side website deployment, there are two types of web pages: static and dynamic. Static pages are retrieved from the web server's file system without any modification, while dynamic pages must be created by the server on the fly, typically reading from a database to fill out a template before being sent out to the user's browser. Web servers. A web server is a computer software and underlying hardware that accepts requests via HTTP, the network protocol created to distribute web pages, or its secure variant, HTTPS. A user agent, commonly a web browser or web crawler, initiates communication by making a request for a specific resource using HTTP, and the server responds with the content of that resource or an error message. The server can also accept and store resources sent from the user agent if configured to do so. Web best practices. Cross-browser compatibility is the practice of trying to make sure your web page works across as many devices as possible. This includes using technologies that all browsers support, delivering better experiences to browsers that can handle them, and or writing code so that it falls back to a simpler but still usable experience in older browsers. Responsive web design is the practice of making your functionality and layouts flexible so they can automatically adapt to different browsers. An obvious example is a website that is laid out one way in a windscreen browser on the desktop but displays as a more compact single column layout on mobile phone browsers. Performance means getting websites to load as quickly as possible, but also making them intuitive and easy to use so that users don't get frustrated and go somewhere else. Internationalization means making websites usable by different people from different cultures who speak different languages to your own. There are technical considerations here and human ones. Accessibility means making your websites usable by as many different kinds of people as possible. This includes people with visual impairments, hearing impairments, cognitive disabilities, or physical disabilities. It also goes beyond the people with disabilities. How about young or old people, people from different cultures, people using mobile devices, or people with unreliable or slow network connections? Privacy and security. These two concepts are related but different. Privacy refers to allowing people to go about their business privately and not spying on them or collecting more of the data than you absolutely need to. Security refers to constructing your website in a secure way so that malicious users cannot steal information contained on it from you or your users. The web is the common name for the World Wide Web, a subset of the internet consisting of pages that can be accessed by a web browser. Web pages are formatted in a language called Hypertext Markup language. Clients are the typical web users' internet connected devices and web accessing software available on those devices. Servers are computers that store web pages, sites, or apps. Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol are communication protocols that define how data should travel across the internet. Hypertext Transfer Protocol is an application protocol that defines a language for clients and servers to speak to each other. This is like the language you use to order your goods. Web standards are the technologies we use to build websites. These standards exist as long technical documents called specifications, which details how the technology should work. Cascading style sheets is a rule-based language used to apply styles to your HTML, for example, setting up text and background colors, adding borders, animating things, or laying out a page in a certain way. Testing tools that can be used to run tests to show whether your code is behaving or not as intended to. Minifiers, which remove all the white spaces from your code files to make it so that they are smaller and therefore download from the servers more quickly. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are front-end languages, which means they are run by the browsers to produce a website front-end that your users can use. Example server-side languages include ASP.NET, Python, PHP, and Node.js. A web page or web page is a hypertext document provided by a website and displayed to a user in a web browser. A website typically consists of many web pages linked together in a coherent fashion. Static pages are retrieved from the web server's file system without any modifications, while dynamic pages must be created by the server on the fly, typically reading from a database to fill out a template before being sent out to a user's browser. A web server is computer software and underlying hardware that accepts requests via HTTP, the network protocol created to distribute web pages, or its secure variant HTTPS. Thank you. KloudLearn Incorporated is headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. Our mission is to help enterprises provide an engaging and impactful learning experience that improves business performance. We provide the country's most modern LMS. For more information, visit us at www.cloudlearn.com or reach out to us at info@cloudlearn.com.